The PB-3000 is right in the middle of the stack of SVS's subwoofer offerings, but does it suffer from middling performance? On paper, the PB-3000s and the PB-2000 Pros have the same frequency response. The PB-3000 comes in a pretty large box, and I actually had to remove the outer cardboard outside of the theater room because it just would not fit in the door, which is why I'm shooting in the hallway here. Once I did though, it actually slid in through the doorway, no problem. Didn't have to take anything extra off, but it's something you may want to keep in mind. Now, SVS also sent over their SoundPath Ultra HDMI cables, which I'll be doing a separate video on. And no, in case you're wondering, the kitten did not come with the subwoofers. Now, in terms of what you actually get in the box, you get your standard fare of warranty and manual stuff, the power cable, obviously, and you also do get a couple of port plugs, meaning you can run this sub in sealed mode. Pretty cool. You also get a metal grill, which in my opinion does make the PB-3000 feel a bit more premium than something like the SVS PB-2000 Pro, for instance. In terms of packaging overall, SVS always gets top marks in this category. I've never run into an issue with their packaging in the past, and this is no different. It's packed extremely well. Now moving on to the tech specs, and the PB-3000 features SVS's new proprietary 13-inch high excursion driver, along with dual 3.5-inch ports, which, like I mentioned earlier, can be plugged with the included port plugs if you want to run the sub in sealed mode. The frequency response in standard ported mode is 16 Hz to 260 Hz plus or minus 3 dB, and in sealed mode you're looking at 18 Hz to 260 Hz plus or minus 3 dB. Now driving that is an 800 watt continuous, 2500 watts peak Class D sledge amplifier. And as far as inputs and outputs go, on the back you'll find a 3 volt to 12 volt trigger input, stereo RCA line level inputs and outputs, along with a USB port for powering SVS's SoundPath wireless audio adapter. You also have SVS's intelligent control interface on the back of the rear mounted amplifier, but you can also use, and I personally recommend using, SVS's control app to access and control all the functions of the PB-3000 as well, including things like volume, phase, parametric EQ, and port tuning. Now currently the PB-3000 is only available in the premium black ash finish and has a price tag of $1,599 US, though as of the recording of this video, if you go dual right off the bat, you can save a couple $100. Now I want to talk about my general overall impressions of the PB-3000s after I've used them for a bit, but just know that I will be going far more into detail in the full review video. Now, as a reference point here though, typically in my home theater, I'm running 4 total subwoofers, but for this video and for the review, I just opted to use the PB-3000s. Now obviously that makes the most sense, right? You can't really give your general impressions on subwoofers if you're listening to other subwoofers along with them, as, well, it just really wouldn't be fair. So everything I'm about to talk about here is just with the PB-3000s only. So I set them up and ran them through my mini DSP just to make sure that they were time aligned and everything. And then I threw a few games at it, and I actually played through all of God of War Ragnarok, about 55 hours or so, with just the PB-3000s. Now, throughout that whole game, there were multiple times, especially later on in the game when it's a bit more bass heavy, that I actually had to go back to my mini DSP and make sure I was not running 4 subwoofers, because there were honestly moments where I could feel the vibration in my seats, and that totally caught me off guard. And yep, confirmed, it was just the PB-3000s. And that's something I want to talk about. On paper, the PB-3000s and the PB-2000 Pros have the same frequency response. They both go down to about 16 Hz plus or minus 3 dB in your room. Now, what I was noticing though with the PB-3000s is because of that extra amplifier power, that's 800 watts RMS and 2500 watts peak, that when they needed to push things and hit hard, they had a lot more power reserve to draw from in quick bursts than the 550 watts RMS and 1500 watts peak on the PB-2000 Pro. Now I'm drawing this comparison to the PB-2000 Pros because that's what I currently have in my home theater and have had for about 2 years now. It's honestly something I wanted to quickly mention because, like I said, on paper at least, the PB-2000 Pro and PB-3000 seem like they would perform the same, when in reality, the bass that you get is different because of the size of the woofer and the amplifier power. But okay, back to how the PB-3000 sounds with games. So I recently started the Callisto Protocol, and right from the get-go, it has a lot of really cool heavy bass moments, as it should, right? It's a horror game, so you'd expect there to be ample low end. But in the very beginning of the game, you're on your ship in space, and as the ship is moving and turning, you can actually feel the vibrations each time that happens. And when I say you can actually feel the vibrations, I really do mean it. You don't just hear it with the PB-3000s, you feel it. And the same applies to movies as well. Now, I listened to the car crash scene later on in the movie Blade Runner 2049, and that provided plenty of low end heft and tactile response from just those two PB-3000s. The way they not only pressurized the room when they needed to, but also hit hard and deep at the same time without ever sounding boomy or muddy or distorted as well. Something I've never had an issue with in regards to any SVS subwoofer I've either owned or reviewed. And yes, that scene has really loud bass, but I also feel that there's some nuance and detail in the bass there in that scene that isn't there in, say, the opening to Blade Runner 2049. Those details and nuances in the lower octaves were brought out a bit more than I expected with the PB-3000s coming from the PB-2000 Pros. I thought it might be a sort of an iterative upgrade, so to speak, but so far, I'm happy to say that it's more than just that, and I will definitely flesh that out way more in the full review. Now, I didn't have too much time to listen to music on these, unfortunately, but when I did, I wanted to try out the sealed mode, and I'm happy to say that again, they do not disappoint. They did sound slightly tighter in sealed mode than in ported mode, but honestly, this may come down to the integration with the mains, as I didn't really have time to make sure they were calibrated as good as they could have been in sealed mode. But throwing everything from Daft Punk to Oingo Boingo to Metallica at them, everything sounded excellent and hit pretty damn hard. Now, I'll test this more for the final review, and I'll also try to get some measurements in REW of them imported in sealed mode as well to compare. Now, if you're interested in what I had to say about either the SVS PB-1000 Pro or the PB-2000 Pro, I did reviews for both of those, which you'll find right here. Now, give them a watch if you'd like, and if you'd like to see a comparison video between the PB-1000 Pro, PB-2000 Pro, and the PB-3000 all in one, let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you in the next one.